So as you're all aware, we're currently celebrating our 50th year of the Municipal Subdistrict, bringing us to a 51st year in 2021. Here we've got an overlooking view of the rolled together Windy Gap Firming Project Water Activity Enterprise Fund, as well as the Windy Gap Water Activity Enterprise Fund. So they're both rolled together here. Let's see. This one is a lot more detail, actually. So we've got beginning cash and reserves here, the sources of funds, uses of funds, and ending cash reserves projected for the Windy Gap Water Activity Enterprise. So on the right-hand side, you'll also see a chart of displaying a historical trend of annual assessments here. So recognize that the debt service was alleviated in 2016, and that's what brought that significantly down. Jeff, I'll pause here if you have anything to add.
I don't have much to add here. I'll have some later. I think you and I might have some discussion to do about switching of some funds from firming project to the actual sub-district related to connectivity channel. And so okay. I'm looking at these numbers this morning and saw that we might need to make a transfer of funds there that would probably affect your ending cash reserves on the sub-district here.
Okay, great. We'll follow up for sure. Okay, so this is a picture of the revenues. I know that these kind of definitions that I've got in my notes here are helpful for me, so I'm going to present them to you all as well. Assessment deferral charges, these are per unit per acre foot for ownership of units. Carriage delivery charges are per acre foot of water delivered, and pumping energy and wheeling charges are per acre foot of, oh, I have a copy. I have it as water delivered as well. Jeff, something's up with my notes here. What's the difference again between the carriage and the pumping energy and wheeling?
So the carriage is the charges that we pay for carrying our water through the CBT system. So there are charges to the Bureau of Reclamation for operation of part of that system and for Northern Water for operation of part of that system. Pumping energy and wheeling is actually what we pay for energy to pump water at the Windy Gap pumping plant. So they're slightly different charges.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as a reminder, I think we've talked a lot about this at the board level and the staff level for quite a few months now. With the new agreement, the charges for unused capacity increases annually starting in 2020 by 1.79%. And so we are at the 134.61 per acre foot right now.
Yeah, and if I could jump in there, Kristen, these are the carriage and delivery charges. These have run close to $100 per acre foot for the last 5 or 10 years, but they do vary. Some of these charges are the charges by the Bureau for operating joint facilities. Some of these charges are charges by Northern Water for operating our own facilities that we own, the facilities downstream of Horsetooth and Carter Lake, but also for doing a lot of the operation on the joint facilities. So of this carriage contract charge, originally when it was $100 an acre foot, about $80 of that went to the district and about $20 of that went to the Bureau of Reclamation for their operating costs. And there was always sometimes a change in those charges. Every once in a while, those charges, a lot of them are based on the amount of water that comes through the Adams Tunnel. So there was one year 2015, I think, when we didn't deliver much water through the Adams Tunnel, and this carriage charge was $160 some an acre foot. In other years, it's been down around the $80 an acre foot if we bring a lot of water through. And as you mentioned, this cost went up about $34 starting in 2020 when we started charging under the new carriage contract for Windy Gap firming. Looking at the assessment deferral, those charges, that's a cost of about $36 an acre foot. I think that we started charging 10 or 12 years ago. We didn't used to charge anything in addition to carriage charges for operating the system because we had saved some money from refinancing our Windy Gap, the original bonds for Windy Gap. So we refinanced those a couple times. We lowered the interest rate, and we also lowered our annual debt service payment. So we continued to charge the larger debt service payment to the participants, and we used the difference to operate the project. And sometime around 10 or 12 years ago, we did some modeling and figured out that we needed to start adding an assessment onto the Windy Gap project revenue. And so we added that assessment. Right now it's close to $36 an acre foot, I believe, and it's been steady. It hasn't gone up or down for 4 or 5 years now, but those are the two main charges. And then the pumping, energy, and wheeling is our estimate of how much we think it will cost to pump an amount of water. And you can see down below under carriage and delivery, we're assuming a delivery of 25,000 acre feet. So I think that number of $980,000 is based on that amount of pumping. We don't know if we'll actually pump that. We charged that last year and we didn't pump it. And I think if we don't pump, we credit the Windy Gap allottees, and then in the following year, when we make an assumption of pumping, they will get a credit for what we had on the books that we didn't spend the previous year.
Yep. Great, thank you. Okay, on this side, we kind of have a flow on the left showing the derivation of the assessment deferral. The table on the right is highlighting our programs and projects for Windy Gap water activity. I'll talk to you real quickly here. I don't have it displayed on the screen, but here are the list of capital projects for next year. Largest, of course, being the connectivity channel, and Jeff will definitely follow up on your comments a minute ago. The Windy Gap pump plant, we have 3 projects slated there. We've got a domestic groundwater well, a Unit 2 gate stem, and limit torques at the Windy Gap pump plant. We're also going to replace the Windy Willow flow meter. I believe Jerry touched on that earlier. And then we've got some repair projects on the real estate front to the cabins at the Miller Hereford Ranch. And then I'll pause again for Jeff to add anything.
I don't have anything to add here, Kristen.
All right. So here we have a summary of the ongoing maintenance budgets for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. All right, here is the firming project. So these 2 charts give historical trends for both the construction in progress and the contributions toward the project. And Jeff, this might be a good place to talk about firming.
Yeah, well, we have shown in 2021, as you can see, a large amount of costs for construction in progress, assuming that our federal litigation is complete, we sell our bonds and we move forward with construction. So these numbers for construction and for revenue are pretty high for 2021. We have, as Kristen's showing you on the next slide, looked at 2 scenarios. We've looked at one where we actually start construction, and those are the numbers that you're seeing in the previous slide. But we've also done a budget scenario number 2, where construction is delayed because of a delay in the federal litigation. We've talked to our participants, and under this scenario, we would ask for cash contributions of about $7 million to keep some of the construction activities moving forward, pre-purchasing a couple of items, as well as doing some of our mitigation projects that we need to do and some other studies. So if we don't sell bonds, we'll be asking our participants for a Windy Gap firming assessment next year. We assume that'll be under the new allotment contract, and we'll be asking them for $7 million, and it'll be a different budget than the large number you're seeing here.
Okay. That brings us to the end of Windy Gap, unless there are questions.
Yeah, I just have one question, General. Earlier on in the district, we talked about the reserve targets, and I'm just curious, with the various enterprises, is that reserve target applicable to all the reserves, or each of the enterprises done separately as far as targeting reserves?
I think the quick and simple answer is each of the enterprises has their own reserves if they have reserves. And so when we're talking about the district budget, that only includes district reserves and is based on district data. So the district does not hold reserves for any of the enterprises.
And the enterprise reserves are not based on any kind of target that's ever been discussed as far as operations or such. Correct.
And Brad can probably answer this more, but I think the general philosophy, except for hydropower, which does have reserves, for the other enterprises, that the participants would rather hold the reserves themselves rather than have the enterprise hold the reserves. And Brad, you can have been, I think, a little bit more involved in those discussions.
Yeah, and which probably doesn't give you a lot of comfort, Dennis, but in my recollection in SWSP and PVP enterprises in particular, in the allotment contract for capacity, there's a condition in there which I believe 1.5 times there should be in reserve 1.5 times the O&M cost from the previous year, something along those lines. And there's ongoing conversations, as Jerry indicates, with participants, making sure we kind of keep it at that level. Over the years, there has been times when we've gotten below that factor, and I please Kristen or others, if 1.5 isn't the exact number, maybe it's 2 times, but we keep encouraging and putting in the budget a number to make sure that, again, if revenues don't come, if something happens that adds unexpected costs, we've got those reserves in place to make those repairs without applying yet another assessment, which some of them would struggle with, given how they budget in their own world.
Brad, it is a 1.5, so 18 months is what we target. Any other questions?
And Brad, I'll also add that Windy Gap does have some reserves. Windy Gap has some reserves on hand that were developed, most of them during the financing for the first bond. So there are, I want to say there's $15 to $18 million of reserves for Windy Gap, and I'm trying to look through my reports trying to figure that out. And we need to think about that for Windy Gap, and also Windy Gap firming. What type of long-term reserves do we and the participants think is a reasonable?
Thanks, Jeff. And Director Yanchunas, getting back to your question, I guess answered another way is the reserve policy we spend a lot of our time talking about, and you all adopted last year, is in fact just for Northern Water, its operations, and even unrelated to the CBT.